Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we got to talk about buy the book, not the grade. The old adage in comic books, buy the book, not the grade. That's what people talk about a lot. And so in this video, we're going to talk about this because I have a book, an unboxing to do, where I bought the book, not the grade. Because this right here is the literal best 1.0 I have ever seen of any comic book ever. And so in this video, I'm going to show you guys the book that I got, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this adage. And while I do generally agree with the sentiment around it, I'm not so sure that it always applies in every single situation. And I want to later in the video talk about a few different examples and see if we can kind of really break down that statement and figure out how that can help us as comic book collectors. But before I get to the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel doing things I'm pretty sure. Let's get into this video here today. All right, I already ripped it open. Unboxing this box. Undo the box, as they say here on the channel. We're going to undo this box. This one is a book that I happened to pick up on peanuts everywhere. This is a book that I happened to pick up on Comic Link. I was browsing their auction that they had, the other week, and this book had caught my eye. Notably because it is such a cool, another pre-code horror book. Yes, I know, guys. I know what is happening to my collection, but don't worry. I got some Marvel stuff coming soon. But this was another pre-code horror book, and what was really stood out to me was not only the fact that this is just like a very, very cool pre-code horror key, but also this was shockingly the best 1.0 I have ever seen of any book ever. And it's interesting because on Comic Link, what they do is they show you the front of the book, but they actually don't show you the back. And I looked up the grader's notes, and basically what it said was this was a spine split. And that really is why it got such a low grade, because this thing presents like a 7.0. But without further ado, let me show you guys the book that I picked up for myself right here. Vault of Horror number 35. Christmas has come early, guys. The great EC Christmas cover in a 1.0 grade, guys, right there. Look at that, 1.0 grade. But look at this book. Look at the cover. Look at how it presents. I mean, this thing looks up close like it could be, I'd say, a 6.5 or 7.0. Look at the back. Nothing crazy or super wrong with the back. Yet this is still a 1.0. And why is it a 1.0? Because of the fact that the spine is split. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus. Focus. There you go. See that, guys? See how the spine is split right there? If you go from the bottom, kind of goes all the way up, probably to about midway through the book. And then this section right here is seemingly attached right there. But the entire rest of the way down, you can kind of see the spine splitting right there. And just for that reason, this book got a 1.0. It does also have apparently brittle pages, which I've never actually had a book or seen a book with brittle pages. Well, I've seen a book with brittle pages, but I've never personally owned a book with brittle pages. But this right here is amazing. I mean, this is such a classic kind of EC cover, great for Christmas time coming up. This is a fun one to put out near the Christmas tree and all the Christmas decors. Of course, this guy is about to chop his wife's head off and gift her a casket, which is, I'm sure she will appreciate as a present. But this one is really cool. Vault of Horror 35. One of the bigger kind of EC keys, at least in the Vault of Horror run. I think a lot of people really love this book. I think there actually was a sale recently this week on Heritage for like a 9.4, went for like $9,000, which I think is the record price for that book. So it'll be interesting to see if there is additional movement for this thing as we get to Christmas, because I do actually think, funny enough, there is a little bit of this kind of like seasonal holiday spec, or at least like holiday books like actually start to trend. We just came off of Halloween, we're headed towards Christmas. There's probably books that 4th of July kind of get a little bit hot in the market, but it's really, really interesting to keep our eyes on that. But that all out of the way, let's kind of dig into this idea of the buy the book, not the grade situation, because while I did pick up this book, it's a 1.0 grade, I did in fact pay what generally speaking the 1.0 price was. I was able to win this auction for $400. And I think recently a 1.5 had sold around 450 or something like that. That was actually recorded. Comic Link auctions do not actually get recorded into like things like GPA. So I did set the floor value for this book at $400 at a 1.0 grade. While $400 is definitely the highest price probably a 1.0 has ever sold for this book, it's not that I actually was paying a price for what this book presents. I was still paying a 1.0 price, even though this book presents really well. And that's kind of where I want to kind of really dig into this idea of buying the book, not the grade, where I generally think that that adage holds true, except I think it mostly holds true when you have books that are negatively impacted and how those books devalue those respective grades that they're in versus, say, a book that is, punching above its weight, so to speak, or a book that actually presents nicer than the grade. I don't always necessarily think that those values will always get a bump in terms of them being, nicer looking copies than their contemporary ones. But let me kind of dig into a few kind of examples here that I think are interesting to look at. I, of course, have Vault of Horror number 35. Now, this one is going to be hard for me to kind of just flip through some books because, the census for these types of things is like, 166, so not too many overall, so it'll be hard to make that comparison. But I did pull up a couple examples of books that I think are really interesting to talk about, most notably here, X-Men number 1, and then later on, we're going to talk about Tales of Suspense 39. Now, with this X-Men number 1, let's take a look at some of the lower grades here. I actually have some 1.5s pulled up, and I think this is where you can really start to see kind of the biggest differences in terms of, quality of like low grade versions of the book and what the spread is for those particular values. Now, I have Go Collect pulled up here, and one of the reasons why I have Go Collect pulled up and why I think it's convenient is that we get to see the pictures of the actual book that's sold next to their respective prices here. And I want to focus in here on kind of the comic book boom time where we're talking, summer of 2021 or a little bit later in 2021. And you'll notice a few different sales here that I think are interesting to look at. Most notably here, there was a sale in July of 2021 for $6,500. Now, it was a fixed price, so, it was what it was. But the fact that this book sold for $6,500 is very, very interesting because, as you will notice, this is an example of a flaw that I think is probably one of the most damaging flaws there is in comics. When you have a cover that is faded, like anytime you have a faded cover, I feel like you're going to have a really hard time selling this book. And this is a perfect example of a buy the book, not the grade, because you could have, say, X-Men 4s that are like a 4.0, but the cover is faded. And there's no way that, those books are going to be selling as much as their respective counterparts. And in this particular instance, where you have a book like this at a 1.5 and the cover is faded, you can see that, some of the books being sold right around it, where you had one a couple months later at a fixed price on eBay for $8,400. So all of a sudden you have a book that is $2,000 less expensive due to the fact that the cover is faded. Even though the cover itself is, held together, it doesn't have like a big chip down here, it's not like falling off or it's not necessarily detached. People would rather pay more, I think, to have saturated colors than, in this particular instance where the book is completely faded. Here's a couple other interesting ones I kind of want to show you guys. This is now in 2020, before the comic book boom. So, we can kind of really make a good determination of things not going absolutely bonkers here. But here on June of 2020, you have a $3,000 sale on Heritage Auctions for a 1.5. It's a 1.5, looks pretty good. Generally, colors are saturated, and, we have a chip here in the corner. And then you have this 1.5 sell at auction on eBay for $2,000. So all of a sudden you drop down $1,000 for this book, which is, 33% of the value of this book at that current time. And what do we see here? A completely faded cover. So that is the reason why you're going to get $1,000 less. And then you flash forward to, August here, where you have another eBay auction, and again, another 1.5 sells for $3,100. So again, $1,000 more. So 30% of the value was hurt due to the fact that this particular book had that sort of flaw, that faded cover, and that is really what I think is most interesting when we talk about buying the book, not the grade, is that it's not so much like I'm buying the book because this one looks better. It's like I'm not buying this book because this one looks worse. Now, that's not always the case, right? We can have some examples where maybe books look a little bit better and you might be able to get a little more value from your sale if in fact the book does present better. So here I have Tale Suspense 39. Of course, we know this book, first appearance of Iron Man. I have a 2.5 pulled up, and I thought it was interesting because there were two pretty good examples back to back that we could kind of look at here. Now, this is right on the cusp of the comic book boom, so prices probably were going up regardless, but this is just before things got crazy. So I think it is still kind of interesting to look at these examples. So the first one here, we have Heritage Auctions, a sale in December of 2020. We have a book here at the 2.5 level that sells for $51.20. Now, this is a okay looking 2.5, a little bit of a stain over here, a little bit of kind of a smudge here on the 39, which I think is the biggest eyesore in this particular situation. It's a half quote copy, no blue under the table or barely any blue under the table. So, it's a fine presenting book, but, it is still a 2.5, and that one went for $51.60. Now we flash forward just a couple months to February of 2021, right before prices go absolutely insane, at least especially on this book right here. And we have another Heritage Auction sale. And this one did sell for more, about $400 higher. And if we look at this book here, what do we see? It's a double quotes copy. It presents really, really nicely. Like, yes, we still kind of have some of the flaws that you would see in a 2.5, but it's not necessarily we're seeing like an actual smudge here. And I think that there was kind of like a tape shadow or something down here. And again, like I mentioned, we had the quotes, we got the blue under the table. So the wrap on this is much nicer. We do have a little bit of an ink thing going on here on the 12, but that one doesn't seem as aesthetically displeasing as a flaw. And so what we see here is we have a really nice presenting 2.5, a 2.5 that presents nicer than the previous one we just looked at. And this one was in fact able to command a little bit more of a premium at that $400 level. So that's kind of really what I think is interesting overall when we think about this idea of buying the book, not the grade, and how we kind of want to evaluate some of those prices where, I think it is a situation where you do want to avoid flaws, like really, really displeasing aesthetic flaws on the book. And that would be a situation where it's like, you're better off buying a nicer looking 2.5 than a cover faded 3.0. I think in those situations, that definitely holds up. But I would never necessarily pay a 2.5 price that presents much nicer than a 3.0 that say has a bunch of, creases and color breaks and things like that on it. It would have to be very specific flaws that I think it would be actually worth paying more for that book than say the other one. And I think, as a seller, you can definitely say, well, this is a really, really nice presenting 1.0. I mean, one of the best 1.0s ever to be presented. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to get a price that this book sells for at 2.0. It's like there's just no guarantees with that. I mean, maybe you can get a little bit more for my 1.0 than say another 1.0, but I don't think that that's a reliable strategy. What I will say is you definitely don't want to, or what I will say is that you will definitely hurt the resale value of a book that has those flaws that are really, really big eyesores. Now, of course, we're talking about resale value here. At the end of the day, if this is something that you're just buying for your collection, it's just buying because you want it, then absolutely, every single time, buy the book, not the grade, because of the fact that, if it's just going to sit in your collection, you're going to have to want to enjoy looking at it. And if you have a flaw on there, or if there's a nice presenting book, then by all means, get an 8.5 versus a 9.0. That looks nicer to you. So I think that this really, really holds up mostly when we're talking about resale value. And ultimately, where I'm going with this is that, it's the negative flaws that you really want to avoid as opposed to buying into the much nicer presenting books. But with that all said, I have a pretty nice presenting 1.0 right here in Vault of Horror 35. Very fun horror Christmas cover. Really, really beautiful book. And just as far as aesthetics are concerned, or as flaws are concerned, I will take a low-grade spine split in a slab every day of the week. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. That was me just talking about the adage, buy the book, not the grade. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about that adage? Anyways, that's all I got. I'm going to go find a wall spot for this book right here. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I will see you in the next video.